Well, hey everyone. It is an absolute pleasure to be here today. Thank you, Catherine and the WCAA for having me here. Really looking forward to getting to talk to y'all and getting to know y'all a little bit. And I hope that this doesn't come away as, oh my goodness, there's something new that I need to do again. There's something else I have to add to my list. And that this instead comes away as encouragement that there's a way forward to take some things off your list, right? Because y'all are all business owners, you're wearing multiple hats, you're used to the daily grind and being overwhelmed. And again, I want to encourage that there's a way forward with a little more peace and a little more balance that can enter your life. And that's not to say that's going to, not take some work to get there. But again, just giving a little bit of a vision and a little bit of encouragement. So as we go through, if y'all want to interrupt me or if y'all want to add comments into the chat, Catherine's going to read them out and she'll help ask those questions as we go through. So either method that works for you. Throughout this as well, we are going to have some specific points where we pause and we really do dig in for questions and have some group interaction as well. So we'll start off first by defining what a virtual assistant is. We'll talk about how to assess whether or not your business needs a virtual assistant. We'll also talk about some digital task ideas that could be done by a virtual assistant. And then I'll help you figure out through a little exercise of how to actually categorize what that need is and how to kind of build an actual request of what you're looking for. And then from my experience, we'll talk about how to maximize and get the most out of your assistant. And then also sharing some industry observations that I've observed that will hopefully help y'all. And then we can also talk about where to find some virtual assistants. So let's dive in. When you hear the word virtual assistant, you can also think of it as kind of synonymous with a remote worker. So your initial reaction might be to think of this as a remote secretary. They can book meetings for you, they can answer the phone, so forth. But if you scale back and you think from a bigger picture standpoint, this is essentially anyone who can help you get tasks done that's done on a computer or that is done remotely. And so when you think about it that way, this really can include anybody who's a bookkeeper or a marketer, an account manager. Again, any of these tasks that can be done virtually or essentially remotely, since that's kind of a synonym. So as you're getting into this, there are some questions that you can ask yourself about whether or not you could benefit from having someone like this in your organization. In the beginning, the first question would be, do you want some time back? Who wouldn't like some time back in their day to go do other things, right? Do you want to grow your business? That's a good one on there. Are there certain tasks that are overwhelming or daunting and therefore you put them off, right? Or perhaps do you feel weighted by the notion that everything is on your shoulders? And if you're out sick or if you're on vacation, then your whole business stops. So if the answer to any of these questions is yes, then the answer is yes, a virtual assistant can be of assistance to your business. Now, the level of time that you might need from them or the task that you might need from them can vary, right? And so that's what we're going to get into a little bit more specifically as we continue to go throughout. So here's some basic pieces of the business that digital assistants can help with. And I can guarantee you that digital assistants can help with this because I do everything on this list. So I know these things can be done virtually for people in your industry. So client account management, project scheduling, bookkeeping, low-tech solving. What I mean by low-tech solving is, somebody's computer is always not working. Somebody's Zoom is always not working. There's always some missed email or something. And people who are remote workers generally have a little bit of tech solving ability to be able to problem solve some basic things because they're used to working in the digital environment. And so for those of you who are not, that can be nice to have somebody on board who might be able to answer a little bit of questions so that you don't have to go ask an IT guy and hire an IT guy every time something doesn't work. Marketing's on the list, strategic planning or strategy implementation, kind of like a business coach, right? Estimates and invoicing. I know that's one that a lot of people need help with, but don't like to pass off. There's a lot of fear surrounding passing that off. What if it gets wrong? And I'm here to tell you that I have successfully seen that passed off, and you can build processes and you can pass it off slowly so that that's effective and that you have the trust and it's not as scary to let go. Being a gatekeeper, keeping people from asking you 100 million questions by sharing those questions, commonly asked questions with the person that you're working with so that they can help figure out which are the most important questions to get to you so that you're not constantly interrupting your day. An accountability partner to help you keep track of things and to help you keep moving forward and keep that momentum. And just really any reoccurring digital teachable task also fall into this, and that's a very wide variety. Organization is another thing. So um, a lot of people in the creative industry are creatives, or in the trade industry are trade people, and that means that they are excellent at what they do, but that doesn't necessarily mean organization is the easiest thing or the thing that is their highest strength. And there are other people out there in the world who are very organized. And so if you are not the super organized creative, but you know that that could be valuable, well, then working with somebody who is a little bit more organized is a benefit to your team. But that's all good and broad. So let's talk about how to figure out what your need is. And I'm calling this categorizing the needs, and we're going to get to a slide in a couple of slides where we're going to have 4 different columns, and y'all are going to be able to write out on a piece of paper that you have at home, or you can do this exercise later, just these different things in these different columns. So we're going to first start by explaining the different columns. So the first thing that you can do to figure out if this is a need is you identify the biggest thorn in your side. Um, Another one can be, what do you like doing the least? What is the most annoying thing to do? Again, things that kind of maybe slide to the bottom of the list that are important, but you don't do because you put them off. Where are the errors and the mistakes happening? Where do maybe the missed opportunities happen? So anything that comes to mind, put it down. This is a brain dump opportunity. The next, in column 2, we'll talk about whether or not you need a systems ideator or if you already have ideas and you want someone to implement. And sometimes you have a good process already, but you're not using it, and that's where the headache comes in, right? And when I talk about systems ideator, this is really going to come to answer the question of the level of person that you need, right? Do you need an expert, or can this be done by an entry-level person? Because if you already have the system and it's a very teachable thing, that can probably be done by an entry level person. If you don't have a system and you're at a loss at how to make something better, then you need a systems ideator. And that's really where your more expert or your senior level people come into play. And so additionally, in the next column, column 3, we're going to look at figuring out how much time is associated with these different things that you're trying to pass off. Another way to back into that is to think of, how much time you want back, or you can identify it per task. And again, once we get down a couple more slides, we'll put this all together. Oh, here we go. So the next slide we have is the last category, column 4, and this is where we're going to be identifying, is this entry, is this mid-level, is this senior, is there expert, or is this remote, not remote, repetitive, semi-repetitive, or not repetitive? So let's get into that real quick. Okay. So column 1, if you've got a piece of paper, you're welcome to kind of jot down with us. And if not, I'm sure they're going to send this presentation out afterwards and you're welcome to do it then. Or if you want to have the conversation totally another time, that works too. But again, in column 1, you're brain dumping everything that's related to your biggest pain point. What do you not want to do? What's a problem? What do you have roadblocks on? Column 2 is, whether or not you have a good process or do you need one. Column 3, think about how much time is associated with that or how much time do you want to get back. And column 4 is where we're going to categorize that need and we're going to figure out those different pieces. So again, that's where we're determining whether or not it's entry level, mid level, remote, not remote, repetitive, semi repetitive. So let's start with a couple of examples and then I want to hear from y'all and see if y'all can add some examples to this that we can practice with. Okay, so our first one on the list is timely payments. And with timely payments, that's a pain point because if you don't have timely payments, it affects not only your cash flow, but if you have employees, it may affect, what you want them to work on. And then you have to change the schedule because you want them to work on something that's been paid for, but the fabric's not here, whatever the issue may be. So a lot of times people might have a good process with this one, but they don't necessarily follow it, right? And then you're spending all this extra time chasing people down, changing the schedule, trying to get invoices paid, following up on deadlines. Somebody's like, we've got an installation date for X, Y, and Z, but they haven't paid the deposit. And so that window of time for you to work on it is getting smaller and smaller. So this is one of those things that I would categorize as entry level because you can make an easy process for this. And to have somebody follow that process can be pretty straightforward. This is something that can be done remotely. And this is repetitive. Your business is always going to be running into somebody where you have to make sure that their project gets done in a timely manner and they have also paid you in a timely manner. The next one on the list of possible ideas could be confusing or incomplete work orders. Maybe you don't have a good process for getting that. Maybe you're not regularly sitting down with your designer right before the project, even though you went through the estimate stage just to make sure that nothing changed. Maybe you could get about 4 hours a week back if you didn't have to do that, right? It's just somebody sitting there going through a checklist to make sure that everything is correct and nothing's changed. Well, that's kind of a mid-level, right? Because on one hand, while you're going through a checklist, on the other hand, you have to have somebody who can somewhat understand the answers and responses that they're giving and be able to read a little bit between the lines to connect and potentially see potential flaws and holes and things like that. That can be done remotely, just like you could call your designer, you could email your designer questions, so could the person doing this for you. And that's kind of in the semi-repetitive category. Checking in fabrics, okay, maybe that's one of the things that falls to the back of the list. It's really important to do, but they kind of stack up in a corner. You do have a good process for it, and it only takes you maybe a couple hours a week, but that's one of those things that does fall into the not remote category. And the reason it's important to include all of this is as you look at it and you look at your whole scope of what you want to start looking for help with, if you end up getting a virtual assistant, your original hope could have been, to have somebody to help you check in fabrics, right? But you may have to actually take something else off your list that wasn't initially on here so that you leave yourself time to do the check-in of the fabric since you're actually there. And then estimates, of course, are a big one. So you kind of sort of have a good process. It definitely takes you a good bit of your week every single week. But this is a mid-level thing because there's definitely aspects of it that have to be taught. It can be done remotely or, it can obviously, any of these can be done in person. And then it is definitely a repetitive thing. You're always going to be putting together estimates for your clients. So those are kind of some of the ones that I hear a lot about. Do y'all want to add some to the group that we can talk through and kind of categorize that different need?
Does anyone have anything that you just couldn't imagine letting go of? Jamie says bookkeeping and estimates are her pain point. How
Yeah,
would a virtual assistant help with something like that, Heidi?
that's a great question. So there's a couple ways to answer it, right? You could have somebody who is a bookkeeper and they separately do your books. And you can have somebody who does your estimates and they separately do your estimates. Or you might be able to find somebody who has bookkeeping experience who you primarily, you know, hired to do your estimates. And then because they have that bookkeeping experience, they can do that for you as well. And that's probably a really good match. And that's probably not that far out there of a request to find somebody who can do both. Um, One, I'm sure y'all have probably all heard about QUIPA coming, and I do have firsthand experience working with that to tell y'all that it is going to tremendously help your lives and you are going to be able to do estimates more quickly. It will also help you let go of giving that to somebody else because it takes away the human error side of somebody accidentally doing it wrong. So that helps mitigate that. So eventually, as you're able to train somebody to use Quippa, it's definitely going to, one, it will save you time, right? Because Quippa is going to be faster to use. And then two, it reduces that human error element. So it builds a little bit more trust as you're handing that off. Um, Additionally, with estimates, as you're getting somebody to help you with that, especially somebody who has not worked in this industry before, scale up to this, okay? This is not a you have to dive all in, you're going to 100% pass off every single estimate. There's ways to slowly get into this to where it's not as scary for you. It doesn't take as much time for you to shift how you're doing things in the beginning. And you can do that by passing off the simple things, the simple things being pillows, right? Or you can write out all the work orders and you just have somebody else enter it. If, let's say you're using QuickBooks, they do all the QuickBooks entry of the information you give them. And then over time, you start to train them to do specific things. Well, you train them to do the yardages on the knife edge pillows and the contrast welt pillows, but you specifically keep the ones that are the self flanges or the more complicated ones. Whatever that may be to you of what's easier to pass off and teach versus what's harder. And again, over time, that person will learn those things, but that gives you a stepping stone to get started into it without having to do everything different from the get go. So that's a really great question. What are some other ones that come up?
One of the other ones was, I think Lisa Baker is not familiar with QUIPA. Can you explain a little bit about that?
Oh, yes. So Quippa is a software coming from Hope Arbery, and she has effectively built a platform that is intended to help workrooms. And it holds both your work orders and it gives you a number for the yardage and it gives you a price. So you, as the workroom, go through and hit all the little buttons. Do you want it the drapery a cafe curtain or do you want it full length? What's the finished length off of it? Do you want it lined and interline, pinch pleat, ripple fold, etc.? Go through all the way, put in your specific fabrics. It's going to be this Roma fabric with this 8-inch repeat that's 54 inches wide. And at the very back of this, it instantly spits out how many yards you need and it spits out the price. And the price that it spits out and the yardage it spits out, it's based on parameters that you set up. So in the beginning, you go through and you put in how you do your pricing, right? What you price per width, how you price for extra length, etc. And it also, there's a way to, in the entry piece where you're setting things up, you can also fit in like how you calculate your yardage to make sure that it's calculating the yardage in the manner that you do. And then again, at the end, you get to generate with a push of a button a PDF work order, a cost, and a amount of yardage. And then for those of us who are using it right now, we're still using QuickBooks. So we would take that information and put that number and the details of the yardage into QuickBooks. But again, it takes away the human error of us having to sit there and do the math, and it makes it a little more quick to do. And then, especially in that example of, let's say you're hiring that out to somebody who is not as familiar with the industry, well, you don't have to sit there and explain to them how to calculate drippery. You just have to explain to them how to use QUIPA. Button, 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 check mark, let's go.
Yeah, it's really simple, and you do have the front end where you need to put all your data in there, just like when you set up your chart of accounts in QuickBooks, there, or you set up your Instagram account or whatever. You've got that upfront time that you need to set it up. But
Yeah.
once all the parameters are in there, it's like following a recipe. First you do this, then you do this, then you calculate this, and then it just does it all. It does it all for you. So it is pretty cool. I've been able to use it a little bit, and she's constantly asking for input from different workrooms and creating the technology, the software, as she goes along. So it's pretty cool.
The software is really cool, but the other thing that's really cool is Hope and like the team behind it, because I have never worked with a software company or a new product or anything like that that is as dedicated to understanding what we need and the problems that we have to making sure that it works. I mean, their whole agenda is to make things better for you, and they really live that out by making sure that they solve all your problems, that they're quick responding, that they sit down and have sessions with you to figure out what you're talking about or how to make things better. Um, I mean, the software is impressive, but I've also been just absolutely blown away with the way that they handle all of our ideas. And I say that with a little bit of a laugh because I have a lot of ideas and I have a lot of questions. So I've definitely given them some things to think about, and they've been great with every single one of them.
Yeah, that is really true. And Hope had a workroom for a good number of years herself. And this was one of her pay points in running a workroom, is just doing the estimates. And you know how we do the same thing over and over. What is that? Einstein said that was the definition of insanity. So here we are. We're all insane workroom owners. But anyway, to change the subject, does that help you, Lisa? Did that answer your question? Okay. Another question is, Carrie how would a virtual assistant help her in posting regularly on social media?
There you go. That's another really good idea. So that kind of lowly falls in the marketing category. And again, with the same thing with kind of the tech notion that even if the person that you hire as a virtual assistant is not 100% a marketer, you could have somebody, for instance, who you're hiring to do your estimating and bookkeeping, but they're also doing your social media. And even if they don't have 20 years of experience in social media, pieces of that can be very well taught, and they're probably well suited for that because, again, they're used to using computers. And just like with any task, you could work with a marketing company or marketing agency or marketing person to build a strategy for your social media, and then you could have somebody else implement it. And so if you're hiring somebody to do these other tasks for you, but you also have that social need, you possibly can tack that onto that, right? Or if you're not looking for additional things and the only thing that you're looking for is social help, well, then you can go look for a more social person. And so as you're looking for that person, if it's specifically social media, you're not going to go to Google and type in digital assistant near me, right? You're going to type in social media contractor near me. And again, as we get into the section where we talk more about where to find it, we can kind of explore some more examples there, but that's a really great question. And yes, they can definitely help you. And yes, there are people out there who can help you with social media, even if that's not completely their background, so long as we build a good plan for that. Or if you only need social media help, go get a person who is specific in social media. Don't necessarily just look for a virtual assistant. Does that answer your question?
Carrie, did that help?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, great. And, you know, on some of the Facebook groups, you could post that you're looking for someone. I do know a couple of people who are social media, you know, that do social media for our industry. And I'm happy to give you their names, Carrie, if you're, you know, if you would want to talk to them. Then Robin is trying to stop doing her installations because scheduling between her and the installer can be, and the client can be really frustrating, as we all know. Plus, I mean, it just, I don't feel as comfortable on a ladder as I used to.
Yeah, the scheduling aspect of that is a really great one to hand off. That is 100% something that can be done. The four primary clients that I work with, two are workrooms and two are installers. So I do all of the scheduling for the two different installation companies that I work for. The guys don't do any of that. And so that is completely doable to pass off to someone else. And it's a small thing in one regard, but at the same time, it takes time and it takes follow up and it takes that precision because you share a date or you share two dates. You got to put them both on your calendar as tentative so that you don't give it away to somebody else. They follow up with their client, they follow up with the other person that they need there that day, and it doesn't work, right? There's a lot of little nuances to that. And so being able to hand that off entirely to somebody else is really nice to just take that and get that weight off of your shoulders. And that's a very doable thing. That's a great question.
Diane would like to have someone create informational emails about products she carries to send to the designers that she works with, or to create emails to gain more business. So that's a little bit in the marketing realm, which is your wheelhouse.
Yeah, that is. That's a fun one. That's a really good one. So that is in the marketing realm. That's also in the graphic design realm. And it really depends on how much of it you want to hand off versus how much ideas you have. So if you are like, I know exactly what I want to say, I know what I want to talk about, I just need somebody to do it for me, then you want to work with a graphic designer. If you're like, I want to do marketing and I through email marketing, but I don't, want to I don't want to figure out the copy for it. I'm not exactly sure the tone that we want to take, then you probably want to work with a marketer because they will help direct and they will either know a graphic designer or they also have experience and they can do the graphic design as well as the direction of that. And there's also a strategy to how you do email marketing. So if your, background hobby is not reading about email marketing strategies and you don't want to take the time to read about email marketing strategies, that is the time when you would want to go to somebody who's a little bit more of that expert. And so I'm going to move my mouse around because this is a really good example. So if we put in column 1 here that, we want to pass off the pain point, the thing that doesn't get done is this email marketing, right? So the next question is, do we have a good process or do we need one? Well, again, unless you kind of moonlight and you like reading and go into all those webinars about marketing strategies for email marketing specifically, the answer might here be no. And then we're going to skip over the time associated with it because since you're not familiar with it, you don't really know the time associated with it. We're going to jump to column 4. If the answer is you kind of don't know what you're doing in that field and you don't really have a good process for it, but you know that you want it, that's when you're going to look for somebody who is more of the senior or the expert level. So that's a good example. And then we'll go back to the estimates was one at the bottom, but we also kind of brought that up. There's a little mid-level of knowledge, right? And that's one of those things that can be scaled. You can start with an entry person and you can teach them how to do this. And I know that for a fact because when I started in the industry, I didn't know what I was doing, but I got taught that along the way. And we did it in a manner and a fashion to be smart and intentional about what we were passing off when we were passing off. So, great questions. If there's other questions in this section that I didn't get to, Catherine, we can screenshot them and I'd be happy to email y'all one off about them. I'm going to move on so that we can get to a couple other pieces of the content in here. Because let's say you go down this route, whether you've already hired one or you're still looking to hire one, I've got some thoughts for you about how to get the most from your assistant. And the biggest thing that I can say on that is number one is communication with anything, whether it's your designers, your installers, your team. Communication is such a big key to getting what you're looking for. And that's true with your virtual assistant as well. And especially because they're not going to be there in person, all the more reason to just be extra hyper aware of how you're communicating and what you're communicating, right? That's also why I'm going to harp on the fact that the things that are the most efficient to pass off are the ones that are reoccurring. And I say that in the communication category because even if you're only passing off a piece of that, such as estimating the pillows, you still have to communicate how you want that done, right? The other thing that people forget to do that's really, really important is to provide clear priorities when giving multiple items. Let's say you're starting your day, you're headed out to an install, and you're like, oh my goodness, I got to talk to my person. I've got all these things that I need to do. Brain dump text of like 6 things you want them to do. Okay, great. Well, unless they can read your mind and read your brain, they don't know which one's the priority. So just add that in your list, or as you list them out, give them the priorities, right? And a lot of times as we're forming the list, as people who are delegating, we don't always necessarily think about what those priorities are until we have to sit down and actually write them out. So it's not only can they not read your brain, but they can't read what you haven't thought about yet either. So that's an important one. As you're having your interactions, you'll probably categorize them into about 4 types. So you have task assignments. Hey, here's what I need you to do. Checkpoints, checking in. Hey, I'm back from this install. Do you have any questions? Do you want to go through anything with me? There'll also be times when you want to just sit down and do a work session. Maybe they're doing your bookkeeping for the month and you're sitting down at the table and you let them know, hey, I'm going to be working at the table. I can have you on speakerphone to answer any of your questions while you're working through the books at this time. And that creates a really good opportunity for you both to keep moving, right? You're not stuck on the computer doing something that you don't need to be doing. You're working on your drapery, but they're also able to keep moving and they don't have to stop just because they don't know what that random $30 expense was from PayPal, right? I work a lot out of work sessions, especially with the workrooms to do kind of what I just mentioned there. So that works out really well. With meetings, it's really important to have them and to kind of set some regular meetings. But the other thing that I would say with that is don't just meet to meet, have an intention, have an agenda, set expectations. For instance, we'll have a weekly check-in where we always meet. We probably talk, 6 times a day, but we still have a weekly meeting. And in that weekly meeting, we will go through our urgent things first, and then we'll talk about the schedule, and then we'll talk about, new business items. So we start same way with kind of the list of providing those clear priorities. We have a priority within our meeting. Make sure we go through the urgent things and then slowly get on to the more fun things. Another thing with that is just patience and regularity. Things take time, things are going to go wrong. You're used to that in your line of business. Of course, it's going to happen here. And I don't want to say that to scare you from, seeking extra help, but I'm saying that to just set kind of a reality there. It still will take time. It still will take regularity. And that's kind of where you can set those regular checkpoints, even if it's 15 minutes a day or an hour, set the same time, different time based on different tasks. You can do things with like, okay, I'm headed out to an install. I'll be back by 3 o'clock. Let's check in by 3. A really big one is to stop reinventing the wheel. And I think this is hard for creatives and trade people because we're so creative, and I include myself as a creative. Um, we want to always solve something, but if you can standardize it, you're not wasting your time. And the other piece of that comes with it is you need to save whatever standardization that you made, which is probably a process, in a logical, organized spot so that people can find it. And if you build that library of processes and just scattered notes, even if they're scattered notes, if you put them in an organized manner, then your virtual assistant or whomever you hire has that to reach into and they can more easily access it. And one more little note on that one. This is all about giving you time back, right? So if you set it up well, then you're not going to have as many of those hurdles down the road. Kind of going back to use Quippa as an example. Yes, it's going to take you a little bit of time in the beginning to answer in all the questions about how you do the math. You are going to have to sit down in front of it with a clear head. It's going to take you a little bit of time to go put in all the details of how you do your pricing. But in the long run, it's going to save you so much time. But if you don't take the time to do it right in the beginning, you're going to have hiccups. And the same thing is true for if you're passing off work. If you don't sit down in the beginning to figure out how you're going to pass it off, what you're going to pass off, um, it's going to make it a lot harder. And the cool thing about passing it off is you can do that in a way where you're not having to write out every process for every single thing that you've ever done or need help with. You can slowly start to build that library and slowly get help on things as you're building that library. Does that make sense? Let's talk about the difference between responsibilities process and what I call a decision-making model real quick. Responsibilities. So this is kind of coming back to the pillow example because it's one of the easiest ones to use. So it is their responsibility that they are going to calculate the yardage for knife edge pillows and self-welt pillows. That's a responsibility. You will calculate all the other pillows that come through for the yardage. The exception on that is if they have a knife edge or soft welt pillow, but it's made out of a half drop, then you will do the yardage on that until you later teach them how to do that. And this is an example of you can get started without having to completely dive in and completely hand over the entire responsibility of estimating and doing the yardage. You can just dip your toes in. So those are things that are responsibilities. The process piece of this would be in an instruction sheet or a video, something they can tangibly reference on how to actually calculate what piece of that is their responsibility. And then what I call the DMM, decision-making matrix or decision-making model, it's where you are putting together certain things that they are allowed to make decisions on so that they don't have to constantly ask you questions. You'll hear different speakers talk about not creating bottlenecks, and this is effectively what they're saying. In order to not create a bottleneck, you have to give people the leeway to make decisions. But as a business owner, you also want to be careful about which decisions you give them. And the way to be careful about that is to be clear about which decisions you're allowing them to have. So one could be in the rounding rules. You can go ahead and set a general rounding rule. If it is under, 1.25, you can round down. If it's over 1.25, you need to round up to the nearest half yardage. Whatever that is for your business, you can put that information down there. What if the designer didn't get the fabric and we're looking online and we can't find it? Well, you have the leeway as my assistant to go email that designer and say, hey, I can't find the fabric on this and I need the specification so that we can do the yardage for you. So those are kind of two small examples. Again, the recurring theme that I hope y'all are picking up on here is you don't have to give away the farm. You don't have to do everything at once, but you can start slowly to get help on some things. And then as you pass off one task and you get a little more time back, you can use that extra time to go build the process to hand off the next piece of that. We talked about estimating a little bit. So I'm not going to reuse the example here. Client and project management works the same way. You can start by passing off a recurring client who's fairly consistent, and then you can build. They don't need to go in and they have to take over all of your client management and communication, or with project communication, same thing. They don't have to go in and take over the entire project management for you in the beginning, but could they handle a client or two or a project or two just to get some experience to give you a little bit more time back so that you can build better parameters moving forward? Absolutely. So kind of summarizing how to get the most from your assistant, do offload recurring tasks, do offload tasks that have a written process, or create a written process so that you can offload those tasks. Do create a decision-making matrix for tasks that you want to pass off. And again, this is all about telling them what decisions they can make versus what decisions that you want to be consulted on so that you don't create bottlenecks. But you also give yourself the safety that you need by allowing them to make certain decisions. Things to not do: don't pass off tasks that you need to be the final decision maker on, that have the most accountability with them, or that don't have clear instructions. And then the other one that I really beg y'all is don't invent a new process and learn a new platform at the same time. So I'll give you an example of this. You're all excited. You haven't heard about Quippa, but you're all excited from this conversation. You want to go start Quippa tomorrow. You're going to hire a new virtual assistant. Your new virtual assistant is going to do Quippa. No. Here's the difference on that. If you both don't know Quippa and they also don't know how to estimate and do pricing for the industry, then they will be learning Quippa and the pricing at the same time, and that's not a good combination. You as the business owner who is familiar with estimating, et cetera, you need to go learn Quippa first, and then you can hand it off to them, right? Or vice versa. If you hire somebody who is familiar with estimating, they can go start with Quippa without you necessarily understanding Quippa. But if y'all both walk into a new process in a new platform at the same time without that experience, without one of y'all having that experience, that's not going to be a good combination. And again, y'all can eventually get to the point where y'all are using a new platform and you're doing a new process, but don't try to do two at the same time. Does that make sense to everybody? Any questions around that before we scroll down a little bit further?
That makes a lot of sense. That makes a whole lot of sense. Heidi, do you happen to know when Quippa is going to be available?
Ooh, that's a great question. I don't know that. I should have thought to look that up before we came into this conversation. I will find out and I will pass that answer back to you so that you can pass it out to everybody.
Okay. Yeah, we can post it in the Facebook group. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, rolling on. So industry observations, things that you're looking for. Again, if you're the creative, if you're the trade person, then maybe organization or process is not your thing. And that is totally okay, because there are people out there who can do that, right? It may be stressful to you. You may be sitting there thinking, well, there's no way that somebody could help me do this thing that I don't understand. But the reality is there probably is somebody out there who thinks that same way about helping you with that thing, and they just couldn't imagine helping you with a window treatment, right? So we all have our strengths. So you're looking for somebody to fill in where you're not as strong and be that dynamic duo for you. The other thing that you're looking for is somebody with some schedule flexibility, especially if you're going to be hiring on a part-time or contractual basis. You may only really regularly want them for about 8 to 10 hours a week, but you want some schedule flexibility, especially if they're helping you with estimates, because one week, man, y'all could get a whole house. You could get 3 whole houses and you have to turn around that estimate in a week. And you need somebody who's going to be able to put in those extra hours to get you to the point where y'all meet that estimate deadline. So that's something to think about as well. From a B2B marketing standpoint, just sharing a couple marketing observations. I know there was a couple of notes about social media. There was an email strategy one. The best strategy that you can have for marketing, through my observations, working with B2B people, again, for specifically workrooms or for installers, the best thing you can do is to have impeccable customer service and to be a good resource. And so, whichever marketing avenues that you use, if you utilize that as your message, that can both be your message and your strategy. If you have questions about that and you want to go down a rabbit hole with me later about how that looks and what that actually means, I'd be happy to discuss that on a one-on-one basis. Um, but I've seen that be very successful, and I'm also cautious as a marketer to, be careful when I tell you, if you're going to go spend a ton of marketing dollars, be really watchful about how you're spending it so that you make sure that you are getting what you were looking for when you started that objective. Um, the other strategies to use that I've seen be a lot really effective in this area would be organic and guerrilla marketing. Um, Organic marketing, again, is like word of mouth, brand ambassadors, referrals, etc. Guerrilla marketing is really unique. The highlight guerrilla marketing example that I think was really genius was back in the day. Um, some of y'all have heard this, maybe others haven't, but when Michelin wanted to sell more tires, they created the Michelin star. Like the whole Michelin 5-star restaurant thing was a marketing tactic from the company who made tires, because they knew if a restaurant was rated really well, then more people would drive to go eat at that restaurant. And therefore, they would use their tires more. And so I think that's a funny one that is, morphed into its whole thing to a whole other thing over these years. But that's kind of an example of guerrilla marketing. And again, if you want to talk about different ideas for how that can be specific to your business or your industry, happy to kind of rabbit hole with you later. Um, I'm going to, since we're sitting at 11:52, I'm going to quickly go through some of the next pieces on this. The schedule management is something that I've seen across industries where everybody tells me, nope, you know, we can never manage creatives. And again, coming from the creative and the marketing background, that's where we started. I got out of college and everybody was just like, oh, well, creatives can't be managed, schedules cannot be managed. You'll get your project when you get your project, but also we have to meet a deadline. And I was like, well, wait a minute. This is completely something that we can figure out. So we figured it out. We built a system, and I've replicated something similar in y'all's space as well. Again, if you're interested in hearing more about that, we can deep dive another time. As you are working with a virtual assistant, somebody who is not at your location, one of the greatest things that you can do is you can share your calendar so that y'all each you have visibility, they have visibility on what the main schedule is, and y'all have different ways to edit that. Here's a quick example of one of the ways that we've done that. So I, as the operations person for this particular workroom, I have my own calendar of where all my tasks are that I'm doing for this particular business. And then the owner has their personal and their major meetings that they put under one calendar. We have a calendar called EMP availability, which is for the employees because there's about 4 employees and they all work at different times. So this helps us quickly keep up with their schedule. And it's also where they go in to put time off requests. And then we have the workroom projects, and the workroom project schedule allows us to, at a glance, be able to tell what our lead times are, what projects are coming down the pipe, what we need to order for. And it's a really, really great solution has fixed a lot of the hurdles that we've dealt with. The quick note on that is if you're going to have shared calendars, it can be a little overwhelming. So remember to turn off the calendars that you don't want to be looking at so that you're looking at something like a little more cleaner when you're looking at the projects. And then kind of sliding down in our last few minutes here on where to find virtual assistants. So number one, the answer to this question is going to depend on what task you're hiring for. If you are hiring that social media person, and you only want social media, you don't have anything else that you want, and you don't really understand social media, then you're going to look for a social media expert as opposed to looking for a virtual assistant, right? You can find people by asking around. You can do organic postings on your website, your social places like this. You can also use actual job boards. Tracy or Catherine, forgive me, Catherine does have a resource for y'all on somebody who can help you find people that you're looking for once you've figured out what your specific needs are. And then I'll make a note there too, like if you hire someone with some of the skills, they can also probably be trained on the other skills. You do in the beginning need to be clear with the skills that you want to train on, right? So that kind of comes back to your bookkeeper and estimate person. They may have a background in bookkeeping and looking for something new, so they'd be a great person to do the estimates for you because that's very similar, and they can also do your books for you since they have that background. Catherine does have that person that she can share with you. I will also offer out that if you end up hiring somebody outside of the industry, I do offer training and accountability partnerships where I can help you onboard them to the industry as well as set up kind of regular checkpoints with them. And that's what I mean by accountability partnerships, to check in to see how they're doing, to figure out what processes need to be adjusted and so forth. Any questions on kind of like the where to find virtual assistants? I know we're running into our last few minutes here. So if y'all want to type them into the chat box what your questions are, Catherine can send them to me and I'd be happy to follow up and answer them on a one-on-one basis. Kind of other ways that I can help. Right now, I am very blessed to have my primary schedule filled. So where I work, like the 10 hours per each of the clients that I work with. But if anybody needs any one-off projects, I'm happy to help with those. And kind of that comes back to that difference of, sometimes we have a really busy week. Sometimes we have a little bit less of a week, depending on what the requests are coming in from our designers. Things that I can help with on a one-off basis would be process creation. I love a good process. I'm a creative, so I really do understand what it's like to be a creative and have to organize those thoughts into a process. I love helping people with that. Happy to help with training, problem solving, brainstorming, accountability partnerships, photography, or marketing strategy consultation. And just a little bit about me. I left the agency world back in the day to create a business that values balance and to create peace and prosperity for people. The agency world is very hectic, just like your workrooms are, right? And I decided that, there's got to be a better way forward for people to be able to make money, but have a little bit more balance and to be able to spend time with their friends and their family and not be running around like a chicken with their head cut off all the time. So I'm also recruiting and training individuals who are interested in what I'm doing. So while I can't give you a list today, sort of thing, if you're interested and at some point in time might be interested in something that, let me know. And as I build that list and build that group of people, kind of check back in with me. Last but not least, as we're running down to our little last 2 minutes here, here's my recap and my encouragement for you. If you can identify the problem, you can solve it. And I know you're used to doing that when it comes to window treatments. You can do all of the solutions. You're a problem solver when it comes to doing the window treatments. You have those same skills that allow you to do that, to be able to solve for finding somebody to help you, right? The other value of kind of hiring a part-time employee or a part-time contractor is you don't have that responsibility of having to fill all 40 of their hours. You can hire for a smaller section of time, and that takes some of that stress of getting started off you. So just start somewhere. Yes, the changes can be rough, but you really do have the skills to navigate that difficult terrain, and it can make a difference in your life. And there is light on the horizon. You don't have to stay in overwhelm. You don't have to stay in the overwhelmed state for the entirety of your business. So
Thank you so much, Heidi. This is amazing. I think one of the practices I've started is going out of town and just sitting with my business, working on things. And it's hard for me to focus when I'm in the workroom to not get workroom stuff done. And I've been in business for 30 years and there's 30 years of clutter around here, even though I clean it up a lot. And it just makes it hard to think. So I think one thing that might be helpful for everybody is to take a half a day or a couple of hours or a day and just think through what do I love to do in my business, and what could I be just really super happy if I never had to do it again. And then make those lists. And then some of those things might be like, oh, I could never hand that off. But maybe you could, maybe you could hand it off. And talking to somebody like Heidi, she could help you to see if that's something you could hand off. And she's really good about, helping us let go of things. So
And that's a really great. Take that list, brain dump everything that comes to mind, whether it's a problem or a pain point or things that go wrong, right? Whatever that may be, put it down on a piece of paper and then reach out. If you can't figure out how to pass it off, if you don't know how to pass it off, if you're scared about passing it off, that's all solvable. And if you don't solve that, that's okay. Like, you don't have to be the person to solve it. There are other people out there who can solve it, right? And you'll have such a great group. Even within your group, I'm sure that there are some of y'all who can share how y'all have passed things off and found that to be successful. So
yeah, and Annette has worked closely with Heidi. That's how I met Heidi. And I've seen Annette just become a lot calmer because she's not like herding cats all the time. I'm still herding cats, so I'm not as calm as she is. But that's because Heidi's helped her with all of her processes. And she does her estimating. She does a lot of stuff for her. So anyway, I'm speaking to the choir, but we will have this presentation loaded up on our website within a week. So you can go back and listen to it again. Diane asked how much an assistant is. They're different if you're at entry level, mid-level, or expert level. And so it's just different with each one. Do you have like a entry level price range, Heidi, that to expert level?
that's a great question. No, I don't. Again, that's going to depend on where you're from and the rates that are in the area. And again, a lot of these things, you're not necessarily going out to Google and to find and to job post for a virtual assistant. You're going to hire around a specific task, and that specific task is going to differ. Your social media rate is going to be a little bit lower, where your bookkeeping rate might be a little bit higher. So I know that's not a clear answer, but that's the honest answer.
Yeah, we just have to kind of look around like you're looking for a seamstress. Sometimes it might take a little bit of work. So if we don't have any more questions, then I'll close us out. But I just want to thank you so much, Heidi, for your work with the workrooms that I know and just your presentation. We all have so much that we need to let go of.
Well, it was an absolute pleasure to be here and to speak with y'all. So thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. Bye.